What happens when the founder of a thriving restaurant chain steps into one of his own locations, only to find the heart of his business unraveling before his eyes? Ethan Brooks, the 42-year-old CEO of Sunrise Bistro, never imagined he'd uncover the truth this way. His chain of 15 locations across the state had grown from a single burger joint he'd opened in his 20s, built on a promise: great food, warm service, and a workplace where employees felt like family. But lately, the numbers told a different story: slipping sales, customer complaints about rude service, and a troubling spike in employee turnover. The reports piling up on Ethan's desk were vague, filled with excuses from regional managers, who seemed more interested in covering their tracks than fixing the problem. Frustrated and restless, Ethan decided it was time to see the truth for himself, not as a CEO, but as an ordinary man, disguised as one of the very people he'd promised to support. Ethan sat in his sleek office on the 12th floor of a downtown high-rise, staring at a spreadsheet that made his stomach churn. 5 of his 15 locations were underperforming, with one suburban outlet flagged for inconsistent operations and a string of one-star online reviews. Rude staff, cold food, filthy tables, one review read. Another: the manager acted like I was a burden for asking for a refund. Ethan ran a hand through his dark hair, his jaw tight. He'd built Sunrise Bistro from nothing, flipping burgers himself in the early days, chatting with customers and joking with his small crew. Back then, every employee knew his name, and he knew theirs. Now, with 15 locations and hundreds of employees, he felt like a stranger in his own company. "Clara, what am I missing here?" Ethan asked, swiveling his chair to face his assistant. Clara Hayes, a sharp-witted woman in her 50s, who'd been with him since the second location opened. Clara adjusted her glasses, her expression skeptical. "You're missing the ground floor, Ethan," she said bluntly. "You're trusting reports from people who haven't worked a shift in years. If you want the truth, go see it yourself." Ethan leaned back, her words hitting harder than he expected. She was right. He'd been so focused on expansion now, locations, marketing campaigns, investor meetings, that he hadn't set foot in a Sunrise Bistro as anything but a CEO in years. The idea sparked in his mind like a match in the dark. "What if I did?" he said, half to himself. "What if I went in not as me, but as someone else?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "You mean what? Go undercover? Like some reality TV stunt?" "Ethan, you're the face of this company. Someone will recognize you." "Not if I don't look like me," he countered, a grin creeping across his face. The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Reports and emails weren't enough. He needed to feel the pulse of his business, the chaos of the lunch rush, the weight of a long shift, the unfiltered complaints of his employees. He needed to become invisible, just another face in the crowd. Clara sighed, sensing she couldn't talk him out of it. "Fine, but if you get caught, don't blame me when the internet explodes with CEO plays dress-up headlines." Ethan spent the next 2 days preparing. He contacted a professional makeup artist, Elena, who specialized in film prosthetics. In a small studio cluttered with wigs and makeup palettes, Elena transformed him into Tom Weaver, a 50-something everyman. With a salt and pepper beard, thick glasses, and a slightly weathered face. She applied subtle prosthetics to soften his jawline and added faint crow's feet around his eyes. The mirror reflected a stranger, gruff, unassuming, the kind of guy who blended into the background. Elena handed him a worn baseball cap and a faded jacket. "You're Tom now," she said. "But you need to act the part. Slouch a bit. Don't talk like you own the place." Ethan practiced in front of a mirror, softening his confident posture, slowing his speech, adding a slight gravel to his voice. He even spent an hour at home fumbling with a mock cash register app, relearning the basics of order taking he hadn't done in nearly 2 decades. The anticipation was electric, but so was the fear. What if he was recognized? What if he couldn't handle the pace of the restaurant anymore? Worse, what if he found something he couldn't fix? The chosen location was a Sunrise Bistro in a bustling suburban strip mall, one of the chain's original spots, but recently flagged for poor performance. Ethan had never visited it himself, another sign of how disconnected he'd become. On a crisp Monday morning, he parked his car a block away, adjusted his cap, and took a deep breath. His heart pounded as he approached the glass doors. The familiar Sunrise Bistro logo, a rising sun over a steaming burger staring back at him. The smell of sizzling patties and fresh fries hit him as he stepped inside, a wave of nostalgia mixed with unease. The dining area was clean enough, but the energy felt off. Employees moved sluggishly behind the counter, their faces blank. Customers shuffled in line, some checking their phones impatiently at the front. A young cashier, her name tag reading Sophie Miller, worked the register with a frantic focus, her dark ponytail swinging as she darted between the counter and the drink station. She couldn't have been older than 22, her eyes tired but kind as she greeted each customer. In contrast, a woman with a manager's badge, Lydia Harper, stood in the corner, her attention glued to her phone, her sharp features pinched in a permanent frown. Ethan joined the line, his eyes scanning the scene. Sophie was clearly overwhelmed, juggling orders while 2 other employees, a lanky teenager and an older cook, moved with little urgency. Lydia didn't look up, not even when a customer sighed loudly at the wait. Ethan's observations were interrupted by a commotion at the entrance. A man in tattered clothes, his face weathered and his hands clutching a worn plastic bag, stepped hesitantly inside. His gray hair was matted, and his eyes darted nervously, as if expecting rejection. Ethan watched as the man, who we'd later learn was called Mr. Ellis, approached the counter, his voice soft. "Excuse me, could I just get a cup of water? I won't stay long." Lydia's head snapped up, her phone forgotten. "Hey, you can't be in here," she barked, her voice cutting through the hum of the restaurant. "We don't allow loitering. Go somewhere else." The man raised his hands, his voice trembling. "I'm not causing trouble. Just water, please." "No." "Oh." Lydia snapped, louder now, drawing stares from customers. "Get out before I call the cops." Ethan's chest tightened. The man's shoulders slumped, his apology barely audible as he turned toward the door. Without thinking, Ethan stepped out of line. "Wait," he said, his voice calm but firm, carrying a weight that made Lydia and Sophie pause. Every eye in. The restaurant turned to him. Lydia folded her arms, glaring. "This doesn't concern you." Ethan ignored her, approaching the man. "Sir, you said you just wanted water?" Mr. Ellis nodded, his eyes tired but grateful. "Yes, sir. I'll leave right after, I promise." Ethan turned to Lydia, his tone steady despite the anger bubbling inside. "It's just a cup of water. Why can't he have one?" Lydia rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with disdain. "We're not a charity. People like him scare off paying customers." Ethan stared at her, his fists clenching under the sleeves of his jacket. He wanted to tear off his disguise right then, to demand answers, but he held back. Instead, he pulled out a crumpled $10 bill from his pocket, part of his Tom Weaver persona, and handed it to Sophie. "I'll pay for his water, and get him a meal, too. Whatever he wants." Sophie hesitated, glancing nervously at Lydia, who gave a reluctant nod. "Fine," Lydia muttered, returning to her phone. Sophie filled a cup with ice and water, her hands shaking slightly, and handed it to Mr. Ellis with a small smile. "Here you go, sir. I'll bring your food out soon." Mr. Ellis shuffled to a corner booth, his head bowed over the cup, his gratitude evident in the way he clutched it. Ethan rejoined the line, his mind racing. This wasn't the Sunrise Bistro he built. He'd envisioned a place where everyone, customer, employee, or stranger, felt welcome. Yet here was Lydia, turning away a man for asking for the simplest thing. And Sophie, clearly kind-hearted, was too afraid to act without permission. As Ethan reached the counter, Sophie leaned in slightly, her voice low. "Thank you for doing that. I wanted to help him, but I didn't want to get in trouble." Ethan's heart sank. He could see the fear in her eyes, the weight of working under someone like Lydia. "No problem," he said, keeping his tone casual. "I'm Tom, by the way." "Sophie," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She took his order, a burger and fries, and Ethan moved to a table, his eyes never leaving the counter. Lydia had resumed scrolling, barking an occasional order at Sophie without looking up. Sophie, meanwhile, worked tirelessly, her smile flickering on and off as she juggled orders and cleaned up spills. Ethan's meal arrived, the burger perfectly cooked, but the experience hollow. He couldn't shake the image of Mr. Ellis's slumped shoulders or Sophie's nervous glance. This wasn't just about one bad manager or one bad day. Something was broken in his company, and he'd let it happen. As he finished his food, he made a decision. Tomorrow he'd come back not as a customer, but as a new hire. He needed to dig deeper, to see the restaurant through the eyes of its employees. He pulled out his phone and texted Clara, "I'm going in as a worker tomorrow. Don't try to stop me." Her reply came seconds later. "You're insane. Call me if you get fired on your first day." Ethan smiled faintly, but the unease in his chest didn't fade. He glanced at Sophie, wiping down a counter with a tired sigh, and at Mr. Ellis, quietly eating in the corner. This was his company, his legacy, and it was slipping away. Whatever. He found tomorrow. One thing was clear. Changes were coming, and they couldn't wait. Ethan Brooks woke before dawn, his stomach a knot of nerves and determination. The mirror in his hotel bathroom reflected Tom Weaver's salt and pepper beard, thick glasses, and a worn flannel shirt that smelled faintly of mothballs. He adjusted his cap, practiced slouching his shoulders, and muttered a few lines in Tom's gravelly voice. "Just here to do my job, ma'am." The disguise felt less like a costume now and more like a shield, protecting him from the scrutiny of the Sunrise Bistro staff he was about to infiltrate. Yesterday, as a customer, he'd seen enough to know something was wrong. Lydia Harper's cold dismissal of a homeless man, Sophie Miller's quiet kindness under pressure, the sluggish energy of the restaurant. But to understand why his company was faltering, he needed to live it, to feel the weight of a shift through the eyes of his employees. He drove to the suburban Sunrise Bistro, parking a block away to avoid suspicion. The early morning air was crisp, the strip mall quiet except for the hum of a delivery truck. Ethan clutched a fake resume Clara had whipped up, listing Tom Weaver as a former diner cook looking for part-time work to stay busy. His heart raced as he pushed open the glass doors, the familiar smell of frying burgers and coffee washing over him. The dining area was nearly empty, save for a lone customer nursing a coffee in a corner booth. Sophie was already behind the counter, wiping down the register with a rag, her face pale from what Ethan guessed was another long shift. Lydia, the manager, was nowhere in sight, but the faint sound of her voice, sharp and irritated, came from the back office. Ethan approached the counter, clearing his throat. Hi, I'm Tom Weaver. I was told to check in about a job." Sophie looked up, her tired eyes softening with a small smile. "Oh, right. They mentioned a new hire. I'm Sophie. Hang on, I'll get Lydia." She hesitated, glancing toward the office door as if bracing herself, then called out, "Lydia? The new guy's here." Lydia emerged, her manager's badge pinned crookily to her shirt, a coffee cup in one hand and her phone in the other. She barely glanced at Ethan, her eyes scanning the resume for all of 3 seconds. Tom, huh? Fine, we're short-staffed, so you're hired. Start today. Shadow Sophie, she show you the ropes. Don't screw up. We're slammed already. Her tone was clipped, and she turned back to her office before Ethan could respond. Ethan nodded, keeping his expression neutral. Yes, ma'am. He was struck by how little effort Lydia put into the hiring process. No questions, no background. Check, just a desperate need to fill a gap. It was a red flag when he jotted down mentally as he followed Sophie to the register dot. Sophie handed him an apron, her voice low. It's not always this hectic, but, well, it's been rough lately. Just stick with me, and you'll get the hang of it. Her kindness was genuine, but Ethan could see the strain in her tight smile. The way her hands moved a little too quickly as she showed him the register's buttons. This one's for combos, this one's for drinks. It's a lot at first, but you'll pick it up. Ethan fumbled through his first few orders, his fingers clumsy on the touchscreen. He hadn't worked a register since his early 20s, and the lunch rush was looming. Customers began trickling in, their orders piling up faster than he could process. Sophie darted between the counter and the kitchen, calling out instructions while managing her own tasks. Tom, hit confirm. After you scan the card, she said, her voice patient despite the growing line. Ethan nodded, sweat beading under his cap. He was out of his depth, but Sophie's calm guidance kept him afloat as the morning wore on. Ethan noticed another employee, Jake Dawson, a lanky teenager with a permanent smirk and a habit of leaning against the counter instead of working. Jake was supposed to be restocking condiments, but spent more time scrolling on his phone or tossing napkins at a coworker, a quiet cook named Maria. When Sophie asked him to help with a rush of orders, Jake rolled his eyes. Chill, Sophie. I'm getting to it. His tone was mocking, and Ethan saw Sophie's shoulders tense, though she said nothing. The real trouble came during the lunch rush. The dining area filled with families, office workers, and delivery drivers, the noise level rising to a chaotic. Ethan struggled to keep up, misking orders and apologizing to customers under Sophie's quick corrections. Lydia appeared briefly, barking orders from the sidelines. Sophie, speed it up. This isn't a coffee shop. She didn't lift a finger to help, retreating to her office as soon as the line slowed. Then, disaster struck. A high-pitched screech came from the kitchen, followed by a plume of smoke. Maria, the cook, shouted, "The milkshake machines." Down again. Customers groaned as orders stalled. Sophie rushed to the kitchen, trying to troubleshoot, while Ethan took over the register. A mother with 2 kids approached, her voice sharp. I've been waiting 10 minutes for a shake. What's going on? I'm so sorry, ma'am, Ethan said, channeling Tom's gruff tone. The machine's acting up. We'll get you, refund or... Before he could finish, Lydia stormed out, her face red. Sophie, why is this place falling apart? Fix the damn machine, or we're comping half the menu. Her voice carried across the restaurant, drawing stares. Sophie emerged from the kitchen, her apron smudged with grease, her face flushed. I'm trying, Lydia. It's been broken for weeks, and no one's called for repairs. Don't give me excuses, Lydia snapped. Do your job. Ethan's jaw tightened. He wanted to intervene, to call out Lydia's unfairness, but he couldn't blow his cover. Instead, he turned to the mother, lowering his voice. Ma'am, I'll comp your drinks and get your order out as soon as we can. I appreciate your patience. The mother softened slightly, nodding, but the tension in the air was palpable. During a brief lull, Ethan pulled Sophie aside near the drink station. Does it always get this crazy? He asked, keeping his tone casual. Sophie glanced over her shoulder, ensuring Lydia was out of earshot. Pretty much. We're short-staffed most days, and the equipment's always breaking. Lydia says it's not her job to do grunt work, so it's on us to keep things running." Her voice was steady, but Ethan could hear the exhaustion beneath it. "Doesn't she help at all?" He pressed. Sophie shook her head, her eyes flickering with frustration. "Not really. She's in her office or on her phone. I don't know how much longer I can do this, but—" She trailed off, her gaze dropping to the floor. "But what?" Ethan asked gently. "I need the job," Sophie admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mom's sick cancer. I'm helping with her medical bills. And I want to save up for college, maybe study business one day. So I stay, even when it's hard." Ethan's chest ached. Sophie's words hit him like a punch, a reminder of the people his company was supposed to support. He'd built Sunrise Bistro to be a place where employees like Sophie could thrive, not just survive. Yet here she was, carrying the weight of the restaurant and her family on her shoulders, with no support from her manager. Before he could respond, Jake sauntered over, tossing a straw wrapper onto the counter. "Yo, Sophie, you gonna cry about it? Maybe if you weren't so uptight, we'd actually have fun around here." He smirked, clearly enjoying her discomfort. Sophie's face hardened, but she didn't snap back. "Just do your job, Jake," she said quietly, turning back to the register. Ethan watched the exchange, his anger simmering. Jake's attitude wasn't just a nuisance. It was dragging down the team, and Lydia's absence only made it worse. He made a mental note. Jake would need to shape up or face consequences. But for now, Ethan focused on Sophie, watching her move with quiet resilience, wiping down counters, refilling napkin dispensers, and smiling at customers despite the chaos. As the shift ended, Ethan helped Sophie clean the dining area, stacking chairs and sweeping crumbs. The restaurant was quiet now, the last customers gone. Sophie paused, wiping sweat from her brow. "You did okay for your first day, Tom," she said with a small smile. "Most new hires don't last a week." "Thanks," Ethan said, his voice gruff but warm. "You're really good at this, Sophie. Seems like you're the one holding this place together." She shrugged, her smile fading. "Someone has to." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken frustration. Ethan left the restaurant that evening, his notebook filled with observations. Lydia absent, dismissive, no leadership. Sophie overworked, underappreciated, heart of the team. Jake lazy, disruptive. Equipment issues ignored. He sat in his car, staring at the glowing Sunrise Bistro sign. The guilt was overwhelming. He'd let his company drift, let people like Sophie bear the brunt of his absence. But he wasn't done yet. He'd spend the rest of the week working different roles, kitchen, cleaning, front counter, to see how deep the problems ran. Tomorrow, he'd push harder, ask more questions, and watch Lydia and Jake closely. Whatever it took, he'd uncover the truth and set things right. The fifth day of Ethan Brooks' undercover mission at Sunrise Bistro dawned with a gray sky and a restless energy. As Tom Weaver, the scruffy, middle-aged new hire, Ethan tugged on his faded jacket and adjusted his glasses, the weight of his observations pressing heavier with each shift. He'd spent the week working alongside Sophie Miller, the overworked cashier who kept the restaurant afloat, and under Lydia Harper, the manager whose neglect was tearing it apart. Jake Dawson, the lazy teenager who mocked Sophie's efforts, only added to the chaos. Ethan's notebook was filled with notes. Lydia avoids work, blames staff. Sophie exhausted but dedicated. Jake disruptive. Equipment failing. Today, Ethan vowed to push harder, to uncover the full scope of the dysfunction before deciding his next move. But he wasn't prepared for the breaking point that awaited. The suburban Sunrise Bistro buzzed with the usual morning prep as Ethan clocked in. The air smelled of coffee and sizzling bacon, but the tension was palpable. Sophie was at the register, her movements precise, but her face drawn, shadows under her eyes deeper than ever. Maria, the quiet cook, was scrubbing the grill, muttering about a broken thermostat. Jake slouched near the condiment station, tossing ketchup packets into a stack like a bored kid playing cards. Lydia was in her office, as usual, her voice drifting through the door as she complained into her phone about babysitting the crew. Ethan started his shift in the kitchen, shadowing Maria as she showed him how to prep burger patties. "Watch the grill," she said, her voice low. "It overheats sometimes, and Lydia won't get it fixed." Ethan nodded, his hands clumsy as he shaped the meat, his mind racing. The broken equipment wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a safety hazard and a sign of deeper neglect. He glanced at Sophie, who was already handling a line of early customers, her smile strained but unwavering as the lunch rush hit. The restaurant descended into chaos. Orders poured in faster than the team could handle, the dining area filling with impatient customers. Ethan moved to the front to help Sophie, fumbling with the register while she darted between the counter and the kitchen. Jake, assigned to the drive-thru, was slow and careless, mixing up orders and ignoring the headset's beeping. A customer in a suit slammed his fist on the counter, his voice sharp. "I've been waiting 15 minutes for a burger. What's wrong with this place?" "I'm so sorry, sir," Sophie said, her tone calm despite the sweat on her brow. "We'll get it to you right away." She shot Ethan a quick look, and he punched in the order, his fingers shaking under the pressure. Then, it happened. A loud screech echoed from the kitchen, followed by a burst of smoke and the acrid smell of burning oil. Maria shouted, "The grill's down. It's overheating again." Customers craned their necks, some standing to peer over the counter. The line stalled, orders piling up on the screen. Sophie rushed to the kitchen, grabbing a fire extinguisher as a precaution, her face pale but focused. Ethan followed, his heart pounding. The grill was smoking, a small flame flickering at its base. Maria shut off the gas, but the damage was done. Orders were backed up, and the kitchen was a mess. Lydia stormed out of her office, her face red with fury. "Sophie, what the hell is going on? You're supposed to keep this under control." Her voice carried over the restaurant, silencing the chatter. Customers whispered, some pulling out their phones to record. "I'm trying." "Lydia," Sophie said, her voice tight as she waved smoke away from the grill. "The thermostat's been broken for weeks. I told you we needed a repair." "Don't give me excuses," Lydia snapped, stepping closer, her finger jabbing the air. "You're costing us money. If you can't handle it, maybe you shouldn't be here." Ethan's blood boiled. Sophie was doing everything she could, while Lydia had done nothing but criticize. Before he could intervene, Jake sauntered over, a smirk on his face. "Told you, Sophie, you're not cut out for this. Maybe if you didn't mess up so much." His words were cut off by a crash. In his carelessness, Jake had knocked over a tray of burgers, sending buns and patties skidding across the floor. A customer, a mother with 2 kids, stood up, her voice shaking. "This is ridiculous. My kids have been waiting 20 minutes. And now you're throwing food on the floor?" The dining area erupted in murmurs, the tension thick enough to choke on. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. We'll remake your order right now, on the house." He turned to Sophie, who nodded gratefully, and then to Jake. "Clean that up now." Jake rolled his eyes but complied, muttering under his breath. Lydia, however, wasn't done. She rounded on Sophie, her voice rising. "This is your fault, Sophie. You're supposed to manage the front. Do your damn job." Her words were a slap, and Sophie flinched, her eyes glistening but her jaw set. That was it. Ethan couldn't take it anymore. He'd seen enough: Lydia's negligence, Sophie's resilience, Jake's disruption. The restaurant he'd built was crumbling, and he wasn't going to hide behind Tom Weaver's disguise any longer. He stepped into the back office, his hands trembling as he ripped off the fake beard and glasses. He smoothed his hair, straightened his posture, and took a deep breath. When he walked back into the dining area, the transformation was immediate. Gone was the slouching, gruff Tom Weaver. In his place stood Ethan Brooks, CEO of Sunrise Bistro, his presence commanding despite the grease-stained apron. Sophie froze, her eyes widening as recognition dawned. "Tom," she whispered, her voice trailing off. Ethan shook his head, his gaze steady. "Sophie, could you gather everyone in the dining area? I need to speak with the team." Sophie nodded, still stunned, and began rounding up the staff. Maria wiped her hands on her apron, confusion etched on her face. Jake slunk over, his smirk gone, replaced by a wary frown. Lydia stood at the edge of the group, her arms crossed, her face pale as she sensed something was wrong. Customers watched, some whispering, others filming the scene. Ethan took a deep breath, his voice clear and firm. "My name is Ethan Brooks. I'm the founder and CEO of Sunrise Bistro. For the past 5 days, I've been working here as Tom Weaver to see what's really going on in my company." The room fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of the broken grill. Sophie's jaw dropped, and Lydia's face turned ashen. Jake shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the floor. "I've seen a lot," Ethan continued, his gaze sweeping the room. "Some of it good, some of it unacceptable. Sophie, you've been the heart of this place. You've gone above and beyond, keeping things running, even when you had no support. I can't thank you enough for that." Sophie's lip quivered, but she managed a small nod, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. He turned to Lydia, his expression hardening. "Lydia, your leadership has been a failure. You've disrespected your team, ignored basic maintenance, and created a toxic environment. That stops now." Lydia opened her mouth to protest, but Ethan held up a hand. "This isn't up for debate. Effective immediately, you're suspended pending a full investigation. I want every employee to submit anonymous reports about your conduct through a new hotline we're setting up. We'll handle this fairly, but I won't tolerate what I've seen here." Lydia's face twisted in anger, but she said nothing, grabbing her bag and storming toward the door. The slam echoed through the restaurant, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Ethan took a moment to compose himself, then turned to the staff. "Things are going to change, starting today. Sophie, I'm promoting you to interim assistant manager. You've earned it." Sophie's eyes widened, her voice barely audible. "Me? Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Ethan said, a small smile breaking through his intensity. "You've been doing a manager's job without the title. It's time that changed." The staff erupted into hesitant applause, Maria giving Sophie a proud nod. Jake, however, hung back, his expression unreadable. Ethan addressed the group again. "I'm not done here. I'll be back to make sure these changes stick. For now, let's get this place cleaned up and get through the rest of the day. You're the heart of Sunrise Bistro, and I'm going to make sure you're treated that way." As the team dispersed, Sophie approached Ethan, her voice soft. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks. I don't know what to say. Just keep doing what you do," Ethan said, his tone warm. "And call me Ethan." He glanced at the dining area, where customers were still watching, some smiling, others whispering. The weight of what he'd done settled over him. He'd taken the first step, but the real work, fixing the culture, rebuilding trust, was just beginning. That night, Ethan sat in his car, staring at the glowing Sunrise Bistro sign. His notebook was open, new notes added. Investigation into Lydia. Promote Sophie. Address Jake's behavior. Fix equipment. He felt a mix of relief and resolve. The truth was out, but the problems ran deeper than one bad manager. He'd spend the next weeks ensuring the changes took root, not just here, but across all 15 locations. For Sophie, for Maria, for every employee he'd let down, he'd make it right. The morning after Ethan Brooks revealed his identity as the CEO of Sunrise Bistro, the suburban restaurant felt different, like the air itself had shifted. The usual hum of the grill and the clatter of trays were still there, but the staff moved. With a cautious energy, their glances flickering between curiosity and uncertainty. Ethan, no longer disguised as Tom Weaver, stood in the dining area before the morning shift, his sleeves rolled up, his expression resolute. Sophie Miller, now the interim assistant manager, stood nearby, her new badge pinned proudly to her apron, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of nervousness. Maria, the steady cook, wiped down the grill with a quiet focus, while Jake Dawson, the disruptive teenager, lingered at the back, his arms crossed, his smirk replaced by a wary frown. Leah Harper's absence left a void, but Ethan knew replacing. One manager wouldn't fix the deeper cracks in his company. The real work started now. Ethan had spent the night on the phone with Clara Hayes, his trusted assistant, outlining immediate changes. "We need a new manager here, someone who can rebuild trust," he told her. "And I want a company-wide plan, equipment checks, employee feedback systems, the works." Clara, ever the pragmatist, had warned him. "Change sounds great, Ethan, but people resisted. Don't expect everyone to cheer you on." Her words echoed in his mind as he addressed the staff. "Thank you all for sticking it out yesterday," Ethan began, his voice steady but warm. "I know it was a shock, learning who I was. But I meant what I said. This place, this company, is about you. We're going to fix what's broken, starting with better equipment, fair schedules, and real support from management. Sophie's stepping up as interim assistant manager, and we'll have a new manager by next week. I want to hear your ideas, your concerns. There's a new anonymous hotline for feedback, and I promise we'll act on it." The staff nodded, some exchanging glances. Maria gave a small smile, but Jake shifted uncomfortably, muttering something under his breath. Sophie stepped forward, her voice tentative but clear. "I'll do my best to help keep things running smoothly. If anyone needs anything, just let me know." Her sincerity was palpable, and Ethan felt a surge of pride. She was young, but she had the heart of a leader. By the next day, Ethan had brought in Rachel Bennett, a seasoned manager from a top-performing Sunrise Bistro location downtown. Rachel, in her late 30s, had a reputation for fairness and efficiency, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to Lydia's volatility. She arrived with a clipboard and a no-nonsense attitude, gathering the team before the morning rush. "I'm here to support you," she said, standing in the center of the dining area. "We're going to make this a place you're proud to work at, but it'll take teamwork. Let's leave the past behind and build something better together." Rachel wasted no time. She scheduled an immediate repair for the grill and milkshake machine, allocating a budget Ethan approved on the spot. She introduced daily team huddles to set goals and address issues, and she worked alongside the staff, flipping burgers and restocking supplies when the rush hit. Sophie, under Rachel's mentorship, began learning to delegate tasks, her confidence growing with each shift. She assigned Jake to the drive-thru, hoping to channel his energy, but his attitude remained a problem. "This is stupid," he grumbled during a huddle, tossing a rag onto the counter. "All these new rules just make more work." Ethan, observing from a corner booth during an unannounced visit, overheard Jake's complaints. He jotted in his notebook, "Jake resistant, potential liability, needs guidance or consequences." He admired Rachel's patience as she pulled Jake aside, her voice firm but kind. "If you don't want to be here, that's your choice, Jake. But if you stay, you pull your weight. No excuses." Jake nodded, but his scowl lingered, and Ethan sensed trouble brewing. The first signs of resistance came a few days later. Ethan had implemented a company-wide Policy requiring managers to complete leadership training and employees to submit anonymous feedback through the hotline. At the suburban location, most staff welcomed the changes. Maria praised the new grill. And Sophie thrived in her role, her smile brighter as she mentored a new hire, Tina, a shy teenager. But Jake rallied whitened, and a small group of his friends, 2 other employees, Carlos and Lila, began spreading discontent. During a break, Ethan overheard them in the employee room, Jake leading the charge. "This hotline's a joke," he said, tossing a fry into his mouth. "They're just pretending to care. Bet they'll fire anyone who complains. And Sophie? She's just sucking up to the boss." Carlos, a quiet prep cook, nodded hesitantly. "I don't know, man. The new manager seems okay, and the grill's fixed." Lila, a part-time cashier, shrugged. "More rules mean more work." Jake's got a point. Ethan's stomach churned. He'd expected pushback, but hearing it firsthand stung. Jake's influence was toxic, undermining the fragile hope Rachel and Sophie were building. Ethan made a mental note to address Jake's behavior directly, but he needed to tread carefully. Firing him without cause could fuel more resentment. The tension boiled over during a hectic Friday lunch rush. The restaurant was packed, orders streaming in from the drive-thru and dining area. Sophie was coordinating the front, her voice steady as she directed Tina and Carlos. Rachel jumped in, bussing tables and expediting orders. Jake, however, was nowhere to be found, leaving the drive-thru understaffed. When he finally appeared, reeking of cigarette smoke, he shrugged off Sophie's request to speed up. "Not my fault you can't handle the line," he said, loud enough for customers to hear. A man in a trucker hat leaned out his car window, yelling, "What's the holdup? I've got places to be." Sophie's face flushed, but she kept her composure, apologizing to the customer and rushing to cover Jake's station. Ethan, watching from a booth, clenched his fists. He wanted to confront Jake on the spot, but Rachel caught his eye, shaking her head slightly. She handled the customer with a free drink and a warm apology, diffusing the situation. Later, during a lull, Rachel pulled Jake into the office, her voice low but firm. "You're on thin ice, Jake. Step up or you're out." That afternoon, a familiar figure appeared at the entrance. Mr. Ellis, the homeless man Ethan had helped on his first day. His tattered coat was the same, but his posture was less defeated, his eyes brighter. He approached Sophie hesitantly, clutching his plastic bag. "Just wondering if I could get some water again," he said softly. "Won't stay long." Sophie's face lit up. "Of course, Mr. Ellis. Come sit down. I'll get you a meal, to no charge." She led into a booth, her warmth drawing smiles from nearby customers. Ethan watched from a distance, his heart swelling. This was the Sunrise Bistro he'd envisioned, a place where kindness wasn't just policy but instinct. He jotted in his notebook, "Sophie, natural leader. Promote permanently," but the harmony was short-lived. That evening, Ethan received a call from Clara. "We've got a problem," she said. "The hotline's getting reports, not just about Lydia. Some employees are saying the new rules are too strict, that you're out of touch. And Jake's name keeps coming up as a ringleader. He's telling people you're just saving face after your stunt." Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd underestimated Jake's influence, his ability to sow doubt. The next day, during a team huddle, Jake spoke up, his tone defiant. "All this training and feedback stuff, it's just extra work. Why should we trust you, Mr. Brooks? You didn't care about us until you played your little spy game." The room went quiet, eyes darting to Ethan. Sophie looked stricken, Maria tense. Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Jake, I get it. Change is hard. But I was here, working with you, seeing what you go through. The hotline, the repairs, the training, they're not to make your life harder. They're to make it better. If you've got ideas, share them. If you don't want to be part of this, that's your choice. But this team deserves better than negativity." Jake didn't respond, his eyes dropping to the floor. Ethan turned to the group. "I'm hosting an open meeting tomorrow. Bring your concerns, your ideas. I'm listening." He caught Sophie's eye, and she gave a small nod. Her resolve firmed as the shift ended. Ethan pulled Rachel aside. "Keep an eye on Jake. He's stirring things up, and we can't let that derail us." Rachel nodded. "I've got this." Sophie's a quick learner. She'll help hold the team together. Ethan left the restaurant that night, the weight of Jake's resistance heavy but not insurmountable. Sophie's kindness to Mr. Ellis, Rachel's steady leadership, and the team's gradual shift toward hope gave him purpose. He'd face Jake's pushback head-on, but more importantly, he'd ensure Sophie and the others had the support they deserved. The fight to rebuild Sunrise Bistro's soul was far from over, but Ethan was ready for it. The sun was setting over the suburban strip mall, casting a warm glow through the glass doors of Sunrise Bistro. Ethan Brooks stood outside, his hands in his pockets, watching the restaurant hum with a new energy. It had been 2 weeks since he'd revealed his identity as the CEO, suspending Lydia Harper and promoting Sophie Miller to interim assistant manager. The changes he'd set in motion, new leadership, equipment repairs, and an anonymous feedback hotline were taking root. But the path hadn't been smooth. Jake Dawson's resistance had tested Ethan's resolve, and the anonymous reports had revealed deeper issues across his 15 locations. Tonight, as he prepared to visit the restaurant one last time before returning to headquarters, Ethan felt a mix of pride and apprehension. Had he done enough to rebuild the soul of Sunrise Bistro? Inside, the dining area was lively but organized, filled with families and after-work regulars. The smell of fresh burgers and fries mingled with the chatter of customers, a stark contrast to the tense chaos of Ethan's first day undercover. Sophie, now wearing her assistant manager badge with quiet confidence, moved between the register and the kitchen, directing the team with a calm authority. Rachel Bennett, the new manager, was behind the counter, helping a new hire, Tina, plate and order. Even Maria, the stoic cook, seemed lighter, whistling as she flipped patties on the newly repaired grill. Jake, however, was still a question mark. His attitude improved, but his commitment uncertain. Ethan's first stop was the office, where Rachel was reviewing the day's reports. She looked up, her expression warm but professional. "Ethan, good to see you. The team's coming together. Sophie's a natural. She's already mentoring Tina and handling scheduling like a pro." Ethan nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. "I knew she had it in her. What about Jake? Any trouble?" Rachel sighed, setting down her pen. "He's better. I had a one-on-one with him after his outburst last week. He's still rough around the edges, but he's showing up on time and pulling his weight. I think Sophie's example is rubbing off." "Good," Ethan said, jotting a note in his ever-present notebook. "And the hotline? Any new reports?" "A few," Rachel admitted. "Mostly about scheduling conflicts and some equipment issues at other locations. But the feedback about this store is positive. Employees feel heard. The grill repair made a big difference." Ethan's relief was tempered by the knowledge that the hotline reports had confirmed Lydia's misconduct. The investigation, conducted by Clara and HR, was complete. Multiple employees have reported Lydia's verbal abuse, favoritism, and neglect of basic maintenance. Ethan had agonized over the decision, knowing Lydia had once been a capable manager at another location. Her file showed years of strong performance, but the pressure of running a high-volume store had broken her. In a meeting earlier that week, he'd sat across from her, her usual sharpness replaced by a quiet unease. "Lydia," he'd said, his tone firm but not unkind, "the reports are clear. You created a toxic environment here. yelling at staff, ignoring repairs, dismissing customers. That's not who we are at Sunrise Bistro. Lydia's jaw tightened, but she nodded. I was overwhelmed, Mr. Brooks. I didn't mean to. I just couldn't keep up. I understand, Ethan said, leaning forward. But that's no excuse for mistreating your team. I'm letting you go, effective immediately. However, I believe in second chances. We'll connect you with a leadership training program at another company, fully paid. If you want to rebuild, that's your path. But you can't stay here. Lydia exhaled, her shoulders sagging with a mix of relief and defeat. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. I won't let you down again. She left quietly, and Ethan felt a weight lift, knowing he'd balanced accountability with compassion. Back at the restaurant, Ethan's thoughts were interrupted by a commotion at the entrance. He stepped into the dining area, his heart catching as he recognized Mr. Ellis, the homeless man he'd helped on his first day. Mr. Ellis stood hesitantly, his tattered coat and plastic bag unchanged, but his eyes brighter, his posture less. Defeated, Sophie spotted him immediately, her face lighting up. Mr. Ellis, good to see you. Come sit down. I'll get you some water and a meal. Mr. Ellis shuffled to a booth, his gratitude evident in his small nod. You don't have to, miss. Just the water's fine. Nonsense, Sophie said, her voice warm. You're welcome here. She brought him a burger combo, setting it down with a smile. Take your time. Ethan watched from a distance, a wave of pride washing over him. This was the Sunrise Bistro he dreamed of, a place where kindness was the default, where people like Mr. Ellis weren't turned away, but welcomed. As the evening rush slowed, Ethan approached Sophie at the counter. You're doing an incredible job, he said, his voice genuine. I saw what you did for Mr. Ellis. That's exactly why I started this company. Sophie blushed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I want this place to feel right, for everyone. Ethan reached into his briefcase, pulling out an envelope. This is for you. A $5,000 bonus for your hard work and for setting the example. And starting next month, you're enrolled in our new management training program. I want to invest in your future, Sophie. You've proven you're a leader. Sophie's hands trembled as she opened the envelope, her eyes widening at the check. This is too much, Ethan. I don't know what to say. You've earned it, he said firmly. And there's more. We're launching an education assistance program for employees. You mentioned wanting to study business. Sunrise Bistro will cover part of your tuition starting next semester. Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but she laughed, wiping them away. Thank you. This means everything. Rachel, standing nearby, gave Sophie a proud nod, her own eyes misty. Ethan turned to the rest of the team, catching Jake's eye. The teenager had been working the drive-thru, his movements more purposeful than before. Ethan approached him during a break. Jake, you've stepped up this week. Keep it up, and there's a place for you here. But if you slip back, we'll have a problem. Understood? Jake nodded, his usual smirk gone. Yeah, I get it. I'm trying. Ethan saw a flicker of sincerity in his eyes, a sign that Rachel's guidance and Sophie's example were making a difference. Over the next week, Ethan worked tirelessly with Clara and his corporate team to roll out reforms across all 15 locations. Managers underwent mandatory leadership training, focusing on communication and empathy. Stores received budgets for equipment upgrades, and the anonymous hotline was expanded with a dedicated team to act on feedback. Ethan made a point to visit other locations in person, not as Tom Weaver, but as himself, listening to employees and customers alike. The changes weren't perfect, some managers resisted, and turnover remained a challenge, but employee satisfaction scores were climbing, and customer reviews showed steady improvement. Back at the suburban store, Ethan stopped by unannounced. One afternoon, the restaurant was bustling, but the atmosphere was warm, almost joyful. Sophie was training Tina, her voice patient and encouraging. Rachel was expediting orders, joking with Maria as they worked. Jake, to Ethan's surprise, was at the register, handling a line of customers with newfound focus. Ethan caught Sophie's eye, and she grinned. "Hey, Ethan, place looks good, right?" "Better than good," he said, scanning the room. "You've got this under control." Sophie shrugged, her confidence shining through. "It's a lot, but I love it. The teams coming together, and the new policies help. That outline? Genius? People feel like they can speak up now." Ethan nodded, his heart full. He'd made mistakes, letting his company drift, but he'd learned the cost of disconnection. Sunrise Bistro wasn't just a business, it was a community, built on the people who showed up every day, like Sophie, Maria, and even Jake. As he left the restaurant, Ethan turned back, the glowing sign a reminder of what he'd fought to reclaim. He'd never lose sight of the ground floor again. This story of Ethan Brooks and Sunrise Bistro is more than a tale of corporate reform. It's a testament to the power of empathy and accountability. Ethan's journey shows that leadership isn't about titles or profits, but about listening to those who keep a company alive. Sophie's kindness, from helping Mr. Ellis to leading her team, reminds us that small acts of compassion can ripple outward, transforming workplaces and communities. The story teaches us that change is possible, even in the face of resistance, when leaders take responsibility and empower others. It's a call to value every person, whether they're a CEO, a cashier, or a stranger in need. If this story moved you, there's more where it came from. Subscribe to Legacy Stories on YouTube for more inspiring tales of humanity, leadership, and transformation. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us to discover stories that remind us what it means to connect, grow, and make a difference. Your support keeps these stories alive. Let's build a community that celebrates the best in us all.